Welcome to the Freely Rooted Mama podcast. Where I am their mother, I make the choice. All right, and welcome to episode 2 of the Freely Rooted Mama podcast. I'm so excited you're here today. Today we're going to talk about choosing a provider for birth. And it's topical right now on my mind because we are currently 28 weeks pregnant with our second. And I was coming, we're getting close to the end. I'm like, oh my gosh, we only have 3 months left to go. And it just has my husband and I really reminiscing about the birth of our first, Isaac, and how incredible it was. And so it just got me thinking about what made it so incredible. And there's so many things. But the number one thing was the people that we decided that were going to be part of our birth team, for lack of a better word. And I know that not everybody is going to use a midwife or have their baby at home or in a birth center. You might, want to go more a traditional route with the hospital and using an OBGYN, and that's totally okay. Except all of us have the same permission to choose the people that we want there on that day. And I find it's so funny as I was reflecting on the birth of our day. It's so funny, we're so intentional when it comes to who we invite, to gatherings, or the first example that came to my brain is who we invite to the day that we get married, right? We're very intentional with the guest list. Maybe there's the guests that your parents want there, but you think about your bridal party, you wouldn't put somebody that you can't stand in your bridal party for the most part. I'm sure there are exceptions to this rule. And you wouldn't have somebody marry you, whether that's a pastor or a friend or however you decided to go about it. You wouldn't have somebody marry you that gave you the creeps or just didn't sit well or maybe said some things that just felt off or didn't, I don't know a better word than vibe, that didn't vibe with you. I know that sounds so hipsterish, but we're so intentional about that, right? But then when it comes to birth, I find that some people don't really know that they have an option, that you get to choose who's there on that day and who's supporting you. It just had me thinking about the birth of our first child. We decided to have, and let me back up one sec too. I find that the world kind of paints this vision that birth is supposed to be fearful and painful and this dark day. I don't know why, that's the word that's coming to me. But if you'd asked me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, what do you think about birth? I'd say it's scary and it probably hurts and it's probably painful and it's traumatic. And, now after being in the holistic health space for so long and getting to see some incredible women that I've worked beside have babies and just see the light in their eyes when they talk about it, I realize we have this all wrong. And I'm not saying there's not complications, and I'm not saying that there aren't traumatic events when it comes to birth. I definitely don't want to discount any of those feelings. But in general, the picture that we paint is very fear-based, very pain-based, and it really doesn't have to be that way for the majority of births. I will tell you that I would go back, besides my wedding day, the birth of Isaac was the best day of my life. And I would go relive that birth over and over and over again. It was just so freaking awesome. And yes, it was hard and it was tough and oh my gosh, it was crazy, but it was the best. It was the best. And part of that is because of the people that we had surrounding us on that day. So when, if anybody's in the Bay Area, San Jose, we used Casanedo Birthing Center. They were awesome. Melissa was the best. She was Justin and I are sarcastic, dry, witty, poke fun at each other all the time people. And she just got that. And I loved, and she joined in on it. And I loved that. There was just something about her. I remember thinking the whole time, because there was a couple midwives and they were all great. But she just stood out to Justin and I. And I remember the whole time thinking, gosh, I hope when we go to have Isaac, she's the midwife that's on call because she just got us. And then at the same time, our student midwife, Charlie, was equally as amazing. I remember we joked about things like The Office and Parks and Rec, which Justin and I just adore all through the birth. And I remember on the day that we gave birth to Isaac, she was showing us the placenta. And I can't remember how it came up. I have it recorded on my phone. But she's like, oh, it's like an Okie afterbirth. And it just lit Justin and I's heart on fire, because if you're an Office fan, then you 100% know where that line comes from. But it brings so much peace and joy into the experience when you are surrounding yourself with people that make you feel comfortable and make you feel strong and capable. And that was what we were looking for. And you can interview people. So like when we moved here to Washington, we interviewed a couple midwives. I'm so excited with the midwife center that we went with. She was actually friends of Melissa. So that makes there's a part of Melissa that's still here. And you're going to remember these people forever. Like I still remember Melissa. I still miss them. I feel like I was with this group of people for 9-10 months of my life. And, now, we don't see them, but they're part of like your history and bringing this child into the world. And so just know you have permission to interview and to find somebody that works best for you. And this is true in a hospital as well. If somebody isn't, adhering to your wishes or makes you feel uncomfortable in any way, you don't have to use them. You can definitely go find somebody else. Just keep that in mind. The other kind of part that comes into this is family. And if you're anything like me, I am a people-pleasing type of person to my core. I think as mothers, we all kind of have this sense of putting others before ourselves. But long before I had children, I'm definitely that type of person where I would self-sacrifice my own needs, my own wants, my own opinions, my own feelings to help make sure that somebody else felt good. And trust me, I got lots of therapy going on about that. But I really made sure that on that day, only people in that room that I feel like that I could be my truest, authentic self, that in the midst of thinking about laboring and having a contraction, that if I said something that maybe was a little direct or not angry is not the right word, but I remember telling my husband to shut up at one point. I was he kept saying oh, breathe. If he listens to this, or if my doula listens to this, they'll both laugh, because he kept saying, take deep breaths. And I finally just told him, I was like, I need you to shut up. But Andrea, my doula, she was sitting there saying it too. And so we always poke fun at each other. He's like, well, Andrea can say it, but I can't. And there's just something about in the moment, what you're needing. But he didn't take it personal at all, because we were all super clear on that day, including Andrea, my doula. We were all really, really clear as to there's no hurt feelings in this situation. We're bringing in a life into the world. So whatever I needed in that moment, that's what mattered. And I would say if you at all are going to have family in the room, really make sure that you're not going to have to be thinking about how you speak to them, or are they comfortable? Are they hungry? Have they been here too long? Do they need to sleep? None of those things should matter on that day. On that day, it's your day, basically. What is going to make you feel the most comfortable and the most confident and the most strength? The other thing I would say is if you have somebody that's fear-based, about labor, or scared about anything, or uncomfortable with maybe any of the ways you're doing labor or birth, don't have them in that room. You don't need that energy there. It's not worth it. For us, we had a lot of family, I would say, or just people in our life that were like, I'm sorry, what? You're giving birth at a birth center in a tub? And that's fine. People don't have to agree with what we were doing. People don't have to fully understand it, but I wouldn't allow any of those people into the room on the day that I'm giving birth, because I don't need their concerns. I don't need their judgments, if there are any. I don't need their fear. I didn't need any of that. I needed all the positivity, all the joy, all the strength, all the courage, all the confidence in that room. Remember that is way more important. And it comes back to hurting people's feelings, right? Because the people pleaser in you might want to I don't want to hurt my mom's feelings because I don't want her in the room. At the end of the day, it's not about them. It's really, really about you're bringing in a new life, and you need to be at your absolute best, most confident, perfect self. And so if a family member is going to alter that in any way, they don't have to be there. They can come in afterwards. They can come visit. They get to be a part of the raising of your kid forever, but they don't have to be there in that moment. So give yourself permission to fully, if you're in the mode of looking for somebody right now, or maybe you have somebody and you're not comfortable with it, or you're coming up with conflicts about this, just give yourself permission to make that day 100% whatever is going to be best for you. And whatever capacity, whether that's a hospital, birthing center, home, whatever it looks like, and then really start to visualize it. That's the last note I'll leave you on, because this is really about choosing a provider. I have so many things about birth, and I'll go into the birth of our child and like things that I did, but start to visualize that birth and how amazing it's going to be. And like I said, I don't want to discredit anybody that's had a hard labor or hard birth. I have good friends that went in with every intention of having this most amazing experience, and it changed. That is the one thing that birth will teach us, is that nothing ever goes quite to plan. And that is definitely true about the birth of our son, which I will go into at another time. But that doesn't mean that we can't visualize and start to think about that perfect scenario and what we want that to look like. So with that, I will leave you here today.